Welcome everyone to this Litmaps Pro Workshop. This is 1 out of 3 that we're doing at the end of this year, where we can support all of the Litmaps Pro users like yourselves in learning how to use the tool and covering any new features, as well as answering all your questions and helping you to see other researchers who use the tool. Today, I'm going to go over an example workflow with you, and the majority of the time I really would love to spend on your questions and discussing anything you'd like to share. So for the workflow example today, I'd like to show you how you can create and share a literature review that looks something like this image. So many of you might be doing research from a variety of perspectives with different reasons. You might be just doing a literature review for an undergraduate course. You might be doing very long-term research as a senior researcher. You can be perhaps a government employee. There's many contexts, but many of us are trying to come up with a literature review. And in many contexts, you're ultimately going to share that, whether it's in a published paper, in a project, or in some other way, or just with your collaborators. So this is an example of what we can really do with Litmaps. Not only can we search for articles, but we can actually take the tool and use it for searching, discovering, then visualizing, and putting it all together in a really cohesive, clear story, which is the idea of this kind of map, where I've done, this is a mock literature review, so it's real articles and they're loosely correctly categorized, but it's just to give you a conceptual idea. What the literature review is about microplastics in marine life. So I have different categories here for the different like species, and one category here is about solutions, and then the idea is I have my paper, my proposed project or my work in the middle connected to all of these references. So this is just one idea of how we could visualize a literature review, showing my work and how it connects to all the literature I'm referencing, but also how does all that literature connect to each other. And that's the kind of thing we would be talking about in the actual paper, in the introduction or in the literature review paper. So to show you this, I'm going to do the rest of this presentation on the application. So to get started, I'm here in the Litmaps app on the typical landing page that you will see. I'm going to be able to start this literature review one of two ways. So I can either go ahead and start searching for literature in the app, or I can bring in existing articles. So I will actually go ahead and bring in an existing article. But if you are starting a literature review from scratch or wanting to come in with no articles at all, you get started simply by searching in the search bar here, which perhaps some of you have already experimented with or are quite familiar with. However, if you'd like to start with a set of articles, on the far left of the screen, I will just click import, choose my file, and drop in the articles. So we accept BibTeX, PubMed, RIS, as well as a variety of manual ways to import articles. So if you have a list of titles or DOIs, you can import in all kinds of ways. And of course, if you have Zotero, you can directly sync and connect that with Litmaps. In this example, I just have these 4 articles from a BibTeX. So this is perhaps typical if you're starting a literature review and you're just in the beginning of the field, you don't know too much yet. You might have a paper from a colleague or an advisor, and you're starting rather small, right? And so I have these 4 papers, and they are all now selected, and I simply click Explore Related Articles. And this will build my first Litmap using these 4 articles as inputs. So a Litmap is essentially, it's just standing for literature map. So it's a way to visualize scientific literature. And that's what I have here on the right-hand side. The 4 darkened dots, those are those input papers I mentioned. And my Litmap has those papers saved to it. So that's my real Litmap. It has those 4 papers. But what I see, all these hollow dots, these are recommendations or suggestions from Litmaps using the Litmaps search algorithm. So our search algorithm works by taking these initial 4 papers, reviewing all of their citations and references and connections, and finding the top most interconnected papers to this input set. And therefore, these are the most relevant papers on my topic because they're not just connected to one of them or in some way citing or referencing, they're the top most interconnected. So that means that they are going to be reaching out to many of these input papers, and they're talking all to one another. through their citations and references. And briefly, how this map is organized, the x-axis is based on the date of publication, and the y-axis is based on citation count. You can actually update these, and we can get into that a bit later if you're curious about more advanced ways to visualize the papers. But as a default, we already have a lot of information here. So we know these are the input papers, these are suggestions, and because they're sorted based on date of publication and citation count, we can actually use that to quickly pinpoint with our eyes what papers we might want to start looking at first. So for someone diving into literature review at the beginning of the process, we probably want to look more towards the top left of the graph, right? We want to look at the more high impact, highly cited work, because that's going to really form the basis perhaps of our literature review. That's going to be the work that's going to connect to many other articles. Often when we're farther along in the review and we've already done a lot of analysis, then we're going to probably start getting more and more interested in the more recent work. What published here in 2024 papers connected to my work? I'm going to start looking into that and understanding what's the newest methodology and approaches. And I'm just doing that visually based on looking at the x-axis to start deciding which papers to look at. And that's a kind of core distinction of why we would use Litmaps instead of just Google Scholar or just PubMed or any other database. And the main thing is the visuals, because we can actually pinpoint those papers faster than simply sorting in the list or scrolling through a list. But of course, you can also scroll through the list. That is very important, and it also can be very efficient. So here on the left-hand side, these are the exact same papers you're seeing on the map, those suggestions. So you can look through it both ways, either here or on the visual. Mine, as you're moving along in your literature review, you're probably going to go through these articles, find one that is relevant, and look at it in more detail. So you can click on the title to be taken to the source page. If you determine, yes, it's relevant to my topic, then the best thing to do within the Litmaps app is to click more like this. Add the article to the Litmap. So this does two things. It saves it, so now it's saved on the Litmap, and it now lets me rerun my search algorithm using that paper as an input. So if I click refresh, I'm going to be able to rerun that search algorithm based on connection using all of these papers. As we get farther and farther along the review, you're going to maybe have dozens or hundreds of papers saved to the map, and this will grow over time, or you might be coming in already with your collection. Once you get to that point that you have many papers, your challenge is probably not going to be just finding literature, but finding very targeted papers. So you often get more and more suggestions, and they get more and more wide. You're having almost too much coverage, it's too broad. So to focus in on your results, to really target your results on the papers that matter most to your specific subject, you can use filters. At the very top left of the sidebar here, you can click this button, filter by date, keyword, journal, and more, and use a variety of different filters to limit the results. So you can look at, say, more recent work based on certain years of publication, limiting results based on the keywords and the titles and abstracts, or specific authors. If you are familiar with the field, you know what authors you're looking for. And of course, journals. So either specific journals, or you can use the quartiles or H-index to limit your results to just more high impact journal work. So if I'm diving into a new field and I really want to see what is just like the top high impact papers published in the last 20 years based on my input set of articles, then I can just uncheck those lower quartiles and really focus on quartile 1 publications. For the rest of this workflow, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next step, which is how do we take this map, how it looks now, and actually transform it into that really well done visualization I showed you at the beginning. So how do we actually get that to this point? So the first thing would be that I'm continuously saving articles to my map. And again, we do that just with that more like this button. And so as we save articles to the map, that will solve the problem of basically staying organized. So saving articles to a map is the best way just to ensure it's saved, and you don't need to worry about it. That's all there is. It's saved to your account and it's there. So that's step 1. And then step 2 is tagging. So I'll show you what that looks like and what that means. Tagging is what brings color to the map, or essentially what categorizes and separates different subtopics and niches. If you're using a reference manager or other ways of organizing literature, I'm sure you are probably familiar with this. So if you have different collections in Zotero or different groups of papers that you have saved in folders, that's the idea of tags. So it's just a way to keep track of the different, say, methods or topics, or you can even use it to separate authors, whatever makes sense for your project. In this example here, I have these tags on the left-hand side, and they are, and the articles on the map are each associated to one of these tags, or at least most of them are. If they're dark gray, that's the default color. Otherwise, they are tagged. And to tag an article, I simply click on it, and I can click tag and select one. We've learned how to tag articles, so now you can kind of bring this all to life a little bit. You have some clearer visuals of how are things connected based on the different subcategories or methods. And even this alone can be a really powerful way just to see how a field evolves. And so if you had, say, certain methodologies tagged in certain colors, you could see like, oh, at what year did this methodology start to get very popular in the discipline? That can be a very cool way to visualize this. The next step, though, to getting it to be a really well visualized literature review is to include things like labels. So, and of course, to include my new paper. So this is the next two things I'll go over in enhancing the visualization. So labels just allow you, as you're likely familiar with, you might be using it off the software. You can save Litmaps and of course edit them off the software. But within Litmaps, you can add labels. So here I've added a title, and I can do that by clicking that small T, add title at the top, and creating large labels and titles anywhere. And I can also label articles. So if a particular article, perhaps this one, is especially impactful or meaningful, or I want to talk about it in my paper and I want to bring emphasis to it, I can give this a specific label by clicking on the article, clicking on the paintbrush, and here I have many ways to actually enhance this specific article, and here I can add the specific text I want to show up for this paper. That can be a handy way to make a call out on a specific work. And what I have done here at the bottom right is I've added essentially a kind of a mock paper representing my contribution or my hypothetical paper that I'm writing and showing how it connects to everything else on the map. So we'll see in the next step how that can look, even more interesting. But right here, right now, we can see right away, like this is my paper. It's farthest along on the x-axis. It's obviously the newest, and it's referencing everything on the map. And in general, if you'd like to make new articles like this that don't exist in the Litmaps database, then you simply go to the top of the map and click Add. This is also where you add articles from a variety of places. You can search in the database, you can add from other maps, and so on. But here, we're going to go to the left and click Custom and select a new custom article. And that's how we can basically add whatever we'd like here, whether that's a poster, because posters, right, they're not going to show up in the database necessarily. So that's something we can add here, or a new paper or whatever it might be, as well as works that you cannot find in Litmaps. You can add them custom here. And once they're added, you can edit them to include references and citations. So that can be a very powerful thing as well. So this is that custom article I made. I go and click references, and here I can add references. I've already gone ahead and done that here, but this is how you would do it for yourself, adding references and citations to a custom article. Finally, regarding visualization, this is the last part that I'd like to share, is how to really separate those categories. How do I maybe tell a different visual story? And there's many, many ways to do that. And it's really, again, going to depend on what you want to show and what you want to explain. So I'll just go back to the original map for a second. So as I mentioned earlier, we can change those axes. And by default, I have the date of publication and citation count. But even changing these axes can help you tell or explain a different idea about your literature. So for example, I can sort it based on reference count or how interconnected articles are to one another. So map connectivity, this option, is sorting based on how interconnected every article is to all the other articles on the map. And this one jumps to additionally, we can also manually move articles. And finally, I know I'm a bit over with the demo time, so I apologize, but I want to show you just one more quick thing, which is we've done the search, we've done a really great viz. And now the last two things, actually, the last two quick things I want to show you is how to share this visualization and how to actually monitor it, or how to stay up to date automatically, because these are two really useful and extremely easy features in Litmaps, so they're really worth knowing. So the first is just sharing. Sharing is super easy. We just go to the top of the map, click share, and you can share by link and share by email. You can embed maps into websites. There's a lot of options there. So I often like to go ahead and share the URL when I'm doing a demo. You guys can poke around if you like. And thank you for the questions in the chat. I'll definitely get to those after the presentation. Additionally, if you're sharing images of Litmaps in your work, then please try to use this button at the bottom right that says export figure, because this just lets you have a much more like high definition and well-adjusted visualization than just doing a manual screenshot. So it's just this tiny photo picture at the bottom right of your map. You can click settings and you can adjust many options here. So you can make the labels bigger or smaller. You can change the scale of these axes and the legend and so on. That's a great way just to make sure you're getting a really nice high-res photo of your map. That's for sharing. Now for staying up to date or monitoring, this is a really simple and highly advisable thing to check out in the app. And as, of course, a pro user, you have special options when it comes to monitoring. So what is monitoring? Monitoring is the idea that, well, it's trying to solve a problem. And the main problem is you've done this great literature review, did an excellent job, but basically tomorrow a new paper comes out, and the day after, and every week and every month and every year, and literature is constantly coming out. And this is a kind of an endless challenge. Now, it's not something we realistically try to all adjust for, right? But there's a very simple way to at least make sure that this review is aware of anything new that's coming out that's connecting to my topic. And so the simple way to do it is to simply go to the map. So here I'm on this middle view of the map where I can see the articles on the map. And under Explore Related Articles, I have the button Enable Automatic Monitoring. And it's telling me that Monitor will scan for relevant newly published articles. And I click Enable Monitor, and that's it. So it's a simple two-step process that I super recommend you do for any map that you really think that's relevant research for yourself. And then all Litmaps does is going to take this map and it's going to run it through the search algorithm every week. Because we update our database every week with hundreds of thousands of new papers, that's why it's this cadence. You can change the cadence though. If you go to Edit Monitor Settings, you can see here it's on weekly. You can change it to monthly, and you can also make it more focused. Again, with those same filters I mentioned earlier, you can use those here in the monitor alerts. And that's something that you all as pro users can do, but not free users. So it's another nice feature to be aware of. Okay, so we got through a lot now with the demo. I went a tiny bit over. I apologize. I wanted to have even more time for your questions, but we covered the searching, the viz, and monitor. So I'd love now to dive into questions that you all have. So Khalil, your questions from a long time ago already, 20 minutes ago, but you asked, is it effective to use Booleans? So if you want to search for works that have the words red and blue, understandable for sure. I can actually follow up the webinar with a guide we have about Boolean operators in Litmaps, but yes, you can use Boolean operators. You use them in the typical way you would in any other search database tool. So if I do microplastics or nanoplastics, then, right, we're getting this as an or. So you can use these typical operators, the pipe for or, the plus for and so on. And they're all in that link I sent down below. Sigurd asks, what happens if I want the newest papers, especially preprints? Litmaps may not find them because they don't have many citations. So that's a great question. There's kind of two answers here. So one depends on the Litmaps database and do we have preprints? Do we have the paper you're looking for? How recent is it? That's kind of like a data availability issue. And number two is, can you search by date? And so, yeah, the answer to number two is absolutely. So I can click, even in this search console here, I can select the date since whatever year or custom year. going to hop over to a map and show you how that map searching works. And we covered that earlier, that in the map, I can click filter. And in here, the very top line, publish between these dates. And so that's your pro-only access to filtering by date of publication. As for preprints, the kinds of papers you will find or not find, again, depends on data availability. So as I mentioned, we update the database every week. But yeah, for example, we may not have preprints because we have papers once they've been through the peer review process. So just because a paper is in archive and it's in preprint, that doesn't mean we will have it. So it really depends on our publishers, or sorry, our database. And so our database is based on Semantic Scholar, OpenAlex, and Crossref. And Semantic Scholar itself has many publishers it works with, and same with the other two. Can we restrict the articles based on some conditions to like only a certain kind of journal? Yeah, absolutely. That's in the same view I'm in here right now is journals. Here, this journal filter, that's going to limit your suggestions to those journals based on a certain title. So whatever that title is, you can drop it in here. And or their H-index and SJR quartile. Joshua asks, how can Litmaps help an SLR methodology process? So I'm thinking systematic literature review process like PRISMA. My short answer is simply, I think Litmaps can be a really powerful way to make sure you don't miss anything. And I would recommend using Litmaps the same way that those guidelines ask you to use any search tool. So right, I think usually it's like if you're using a tool, you should record what version you're using and the date you pull down the data and how the keywords you're searching for and all this information. So you can follow basically these same protocols and you can record what our source databases are, as I just mentioned. And then I think it's quite in line with how those guidelines dictate you should be doing your sourcing, from what I understand. So you can conduct a search like this from scratch. But where Litmaps is really powerful is exactly in this kind of view that I have right here. So imagine all these articles here are the 100 or 200 articles you've already discovered, and you want to see, did I miss anything? Simply input those into Litmaps, and you instantly can see any missing connections you may have overlooked. Additionally, the thing I didn't have time to show in the presentation is another way to search in Litmaps that can also help you detect gaps, especially for something like a systematic review, because right, connection shows us papers we may have overlooked, but they are actually connected to the work. So that's really useful if, say, the keywords don't match up. So they're not having the same keywords, but they're having connections. Great. But sometimes you have the opposite problem. So you have that this paper is relevant. It's on even very similar text or topic, but there's no connection. And we can still find those in Litmaps by changing the search algorithm. So next to this filter button, there is this icon and says search algorithm if I hover over it. If I click on that, I actually have two other algorithms I can change to. One is looking at something dealing with authors, and the other is what I'm talking about right now, called similar text. So this uses an AI large language model to find articles that are semantically similar to your input articles based on their abstracts and titles. So that's another way to discover literature in the app. So both of these ways I think are a very good way, a very good application to use in systematic reviews. And I think we have researchers who they're doing the whole search or using Litmaps for systematic reviews, which is why I have the guide, because it's a great use case. And Sigurd, I think you asked another question here. In a custom reference, does it automatically extract the references, or do I have to add this manually? I'll just go to the edit portion of it and click on references. So I think what you mean here is if I want to add references, can I mass import? And the answer is yes, because here I have the import button. So here I could just drop in a bibtec of what I would say is this article's references. The important thing to note, though, is when you do this process and you're dealing with custom articles in Litmaps, right now, that is only going to assist you visually and in your organization. It will not impact your search. So for example, you can see that already if I sort this map based on map connectivity, my article is here. It's on the far left, which means it has the least amount of connections, even though my article actually has the most amount of connections. And that's because it's a custom article. And so in our algorithms and in our sorting, and basically as far as our database is concerned, this article doesn't actually have connections. So that's why I say it's something you can use in your visualizations. You can use it as a way to tell your story or stay organized and keep track of things for yourself. But when it comes to searching, unfortunately, we don't have that implemented yet. It's a very big project and something we want to do, but it's a very involved thing that we haven't yet implemented. But if that's something that you think would be really useful, make sure to drop a line, because we are always responding to what's useful for you all. So it would be good to know if that sounds like a really urgent feature. Balaji asks how to copy a tag from one Litmap workspace to another Litmap workspace. Great question. So let's try to do it here. If I go and click on this tag, for example, I select all the articles in the tag, click on options. So, because I can see here, I can change the tags and the litmaps here, but that's within this workspace, so that's not what I want. I click on the 3 dots, I click add to, and then here on this page is where you can move things between workspaces. So here I'm in this workspace, and I can change it to any of my other workspaces. So now I can look at this workspace, I could create a brand new tag and drop it into that. And as a side note for anyone here that's not familiar with what is a workspace, that's just a way to separate out your projects and Litmaps. So if you've ever reached the point to where you're thinking, oh, I really wish I could hide this tag because I don't want it's distracting me or something like that, then probably you can make a new workspace, and this will give you a whole new clean layout. So tags and Litmaps are saved to your workspace. That's why when you make a new one, you have kind of this fresh start. And so it's a good way to separate your work and keep it organized. And as a side note, to make a new workspace, you go to your home, click on the logo at the top. You'll find your workspace here, and you can just scroll down and click create a new workspace. Federico asks, can you show again how to add the newly proposed paper at the map? Oh, cool. Absolutely. I'm glad that seems like a useful application for you. So to add custom article, I'll exit explore mode here. It's going into the map. So I pulled up my map, and here at the top, I click add. And here on the left, I have basically all the different ways we can put articles into maps. And I just click custom. Here I have new custom article. And here I can fill out all their details. So whatever that might be. I can do URL, publication title, authors, even DOIs and abstracts. I can fill out a few fields here, click save. And that's it. And so now this is a paper that I can add to my Litmap if I'd like. So as a side note, I'm showing you how to make a custom article from scratch. But what another option you can do is if you have an article, you can actually duplicate it in order to update it. So for example, say I find this article and I'd like to use it in my map and to explain, hey, look, this article has 45 references. But here I'm in the app and I say, oh, look, it has 30 references. Now, the reason references and citations might be different is a very big question, and I have also an answer for that. If you're ever finding something here in this paper that you'd like to update, you can do this. So you can click on these 3 dots here and click edit a copy. And I'll make a note here. I'm creating a copy, and in all of these, I can replace, in all these different maps, I'm replacing this article with my copy. And I can edit this however I like. So this isn't just a side note, it's another way to use custom articles in Litmaps to edit existing articles you find. Abel asks, how did you get the labels of the subheadings of my literature review? So to do this, I'm on my main Litmap again in the general view, and I see these 2 options at the top, this kind of text option and the square option. So this text option is the tool we use to add any kind of labels to maps. And I can type here, and then here I can change the sizing of that. So for the very tiny labels, I just made it small, and it looks nice like this. And as a side note, we didn't quite have time, but you can also add these nice rectangles. So if I'm wanting to talk about like a region of work or to delineate 2 regions of work, can use these nice rectangles. And essentially, as a side note, anywhere in the app you see color, so here this rectangle, all these dots, you can always change the color and you can really make it as precise as you'd like. I'm just reading a comment by S.C. Fowler that they are using tags and then the workflow with Litmaps as well as Zotero and SciSpace. And you're trying to figure out how to leverage workflows more efficiently across all 3. So thanks so much for sharing that. Really cool to hear. I know it's not a question, but then I would love to then point out for you and for anyone else here who is a Zotero user, that there is one way to make your workflow much faster if you're using Zotero and Litmaps, and that's by using the Zotero sync feature. So you can, of course, import and export articles into Litmaps and likely into all the other software you use. But a much faster way is actually simply to synchronize Zotero. So if you already have your articles there and you want to do this, you go to the Litmaps app, and on the far left, next to import, you see sync. I click on sync, and here there will be a button that says you can create your synced Zotero account. In this case, I have it already set up. And because it's set up, I can just create a new synced tag. And when I do that, it will just pull in my articles from Zotero and automatically sync between them. So it will take a little bit of time to load here. It's quite a lot of articles I handle. But in this tag, I'll be able to explore these in Litmaps. And when I add something to this tag, it'll instantly show up in Zotero. I mean, it might take a minute to sync, but it will be automatically synchronized. So that's a really cool way to save time if you're a Zotero user. As for SciSpace, I don't know, but I will research what would be a cool workflow with SciSpace. And Rick is asking, should the colors have come across with the saved copy of your map? Cool question. So tags are saved to a whole workspace. So that means if and I can even show you a nice example here. I'm trying to think. If perhaps I search for microplastics marine turtles. This is just similar to my topic, so I'm expecting to find something relevant. The very first article that comes up, I can see I already have it tagged. So across everything in this workspace, if I find any article, it will show up in the state that that is reflective of any tags or any changes that I made to it. And so, of course, across all of these maps, if the same article exists in these maps, it will have the same tags. Tags are just a way to kind of categorize across this whole workspace. If you want to delineate something and say, I wanted to forget about this tag and I want to view it in a whole new way, then you can copy it to a different workspace where you start from scratch. Additionally, it's important to note you can have multiple colors even. So I can make it both of these topics if I like. I can add as many tags as I want. So you don't have to always separate, right? You can make a more top level category if that's something you want to do. And as a side note, you can also see here that tags are pretty prevalent. Once you start using them, I think you'll really grow to like them because you can really see them basically pop up everywhere. So for example, I found this paper, and among its 95 references, I can see that there's 11 that I have tagged. So it's a really fast way just to see how much coverage I have across different papers and in different connections and so on. Hiroyuki, you ask, does the map monitoring feature notify you via email when the map is updated? Great, yes. So for monitoring, you will get an email only if a new article comes out on your topic and it's connected to your map. And then you'll be taken to a page that shows you hey, this is your map and these are the new articles. And you can choose whether to explore them in more detail or add them to your map and so on. And yes, and that's why monitoring is great because you only get emails if you have a suggestion. It won't email you for any other reason. Lucia asks, is there a way to add a note to a saved article to include the main points or a major conclusion? Really cool question. I'll make a note of it because, yeah, right now we unfortunately have no way to make notes other than that tiny label feature I mentioned to you. So for example, just hop over to this map, how I put this paper and I wrote new proposed paper. That's the best thing we have right now to notes. So we have labels, but no notes. Notes is a thing that users have mentioned though, and it's something we are really considering building. So thanks for mentioning that. I made a note of it. Martin asks, can you import a list of articles from Citavi or other reference managers? So you can import any kind of BibTeX, RIS, PubMed, or manually uploading lists of different information like titles or DOIs and so on. So for basically virtually any reference manager, if you can export those files as a BibTeX, you can easily bring them into Litmaps and then hopefully vice versa, export them from Litmaps and import them back into your source tool. And again, if you're a Zotero user, you can just sync this automatically and directly. Dimitro asks, do you have an option to filter papers published at specific conferences? Ooh, that's very cool. And then, yeah, I can imagine, of course, like for something like computer science, it's more conference focused and we care about conferences a lot and not just journals. So this is an excellent question. I can imagine this is very useful for some disciplines. However, unfortunately, at this point, there's no way to filter by conferences. There's only way to filter by journals. I mean, maybe the most helpful thing I would say is if these conferences have lists of articles online that you can download and you can mass import into Litmaps, that would be one way to quickly like go through them or something like that. If you know already you're really interested in the articles from that conference and you have access to them, then at least you can very quickly pull them up and actually go through them very efficiently as compared to going through them in a list. Claudia asks if there's any published papers that have used Litmaps in their literature review. Yes, very good question. So this is just an article I posted right now in the chat, but here's a small section of examples of Litmaps in published work. And you yourself might discover other articles or better examples. Here are just different publications that are using Litmaps in their work. And so here I've just screenshotted how are they using those figures and just briefly mentioned what they're doing. So we have a mixture. Maybe half are articles that use Litmaps, like they're just articles about any domain or topic, and they're using the Litmap to show their literature review. And the other half are papers that are evaluating tools like Litmaps, and so we're in that for that reason. So you can really focus on the papers that are using probably Litmaps as a search tool.
Hi, it's
Hi.
Jonathan.
Yes,
Yeah.
hi Jonathan, welcome. How's it going?
Yes, thanks. I'm doing great. Hey, just a quick question, if I may. Could you show that map? I really like what you had done with the separation of the clustering. And I hadn't thought about doing that in mine yet, but I was looking for a way to do it. So I'm guessing that what you did was after you tagged everything, you actually went and then pulled them apart, basically moved the grouping of tags. So that, and I guess, so, okay. And the fact that you have the new proposed paper, that new proposed paper, as I understood it, that would be, for example, if I wanted to show where, is it where I would like to show what our idea would be and just showing that it connects to the other ones because we'll be citing those that we've now found? I'm trying to figure out how that new proposed paper fits in there because I like how it's connecting to everything. But just can you kind of explain the new proposed paper once more, just so I make sure I got that? Thanks.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, thanks so much for the question. And if you have another idea or way of doing that, I really welcome it because this is more of actually my idea because we have now custom articles. And I welcome you all to share however you think custom articles are useful for you, because this is the main way I could imagine it could be interesting. So for example, if I am like a master's student and I made a project, that project, we will never, we won't have it in the database and it won't have references, but what at least I can do is I can, in a sense, put it onto the literature landscape and I can say, hey, this is my new paper, my new poster, and it is referencing literally everything here. And it's just a fun visual aid. It's not it's the same as not having it at all, right? I guess it's just more putting it into context right away. And of course the other interesting note is to say, well, we can immediately see this has connections to everything, but we also on the other map, perhaps that's even more useful in another context, but essentially I mean to say we can see how all the many connections, whereas if I'm highlighting over any other article, there just simply isn't any other article that's covering the field so efficiently. And I think that's kind of a part of the story I would want to tell with something like this, is to say, hey, this paper is actually combining all these topics and niches, whereas when I look at these other groups, they're not actually as widespread as my work. So that's kind of the idea here, is trying to show the connection. But I welcome any ideas you have. I mean, whatever.
Yeah, I'm going to think about it some more. The other thought I had was, even if I did not want to put the new proposed paper, and I just want to show the clustering effect of how different, I could leave out that new proposed paper basically and do the same thing here with, I'm saying clustering, it's by tags is what I mean. Taking my tags and moving them. And then like you did, identify what those tags are all talking about in terms of their content of their articles. So, okay, I see you've just removed the new proposal. Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely, that's a great way to put it. Yeah, and I sometimes make them like this too. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I'm still actually on the fence of how useful the the custom article is. But yeah, that's great to hear that this is useful, the clustering. And yeah, I think that can be a cool way to show the interconnectedness of subtopics, maybe.
And just if I could monopolize one last question, if you highlight the orange on the right side, that cluster of articles, okay, and it's got a blue there, is there a way that I can export that to show how it is only connected, like you were saying, to certain groups without losing those blue line connections showing that? I want to tell the story that that group does not touch everybody. It only touches a couple of other places. Can I export that exactly like it is?
Great question. So yeah, I would say like in this context, like I guess there's one of two things. Like one is obviously we can do something like a screenshot, and then this would be one answer. But if we wanted to use the Litmaps app to say export these articles or do something like that. Oh yeah, so within the app, I can do a screenshot as well here, and it's keeping that highlighted styling. So
Great. Okay.
Yeah, so it does keep that. That's great. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the questions, Jonathan. It's really good to have you.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Thank you all so much for attending. Thanks for so many thoughtful questions. It's really cool to see how everyone is looking at the tool and considering the different features. I hope you got a lot out of today. And we still have one more pro workshop in a week and a half or so. We will probably do a similar thing, workflow, and then question session. And of course, feel free to reach out with any other ideas or questions, topics, feature requests in the meantime in the app support. So that little button, we are always here to answer anything that comes up. So yes, thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you, Marina. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Great to hear.